Welcome to the Prospective Doctor podcast, brought to you by Med School Coach. Pre-med and medical students alike are encouraged to tune in each week for tips on how to become a strong med school candidate, gain acceptance into the school of your dreams, and succeed on your journey toward residency and becoming a doctor.
Hello, everyone listening out there. I'm very delighted to have a very special guest, one of my dear friends and special colleagues, Dr. Erin Jones. I'll leave it up to her to give us an introduction as to who she is and what she does.
Hello out there. Dr. DeRouen, thank you for that warm welcome and this invitation to speak with your audience. I deeply appreciate it. I would say, describing myself, I'm a Southerner in my heart, and I also have a lot of experience with caring for students, teaching students, and taking care of patients. My background medically is that I have a primary training in family medicine that I completed in Baltimore, Maryland at the University of Maryland. I'm also fellowship trained in adolescent and young adult care at the University of California, San Francisco. And currently I hold two positions. I'm on faculty at USC in the Department of Family Medicine, focusing on the care for students on campus. I also work in virtual healthcare with 98.6 at this time. In addition, I also have my own nonprofit and volunteer organization that I've started with my husband.
Wow, those are a lot of different hats that you wear. You must be very busy.
Well, that's the nature of family medicine. It's to wear so many hats and do it all.
I totally agree. Now, would you be able to tell us a little more about what led you to choose family medicine as a specialty?
Sure. To me, I always think of community first. In my family, we have a lot of roots in community organization. And so when I looked at picking a specialty or even picking medicine, I thought, how could I use my skills, talents, and interests to affect my community? And I picked family medicine because I was interested in the whole thing, the whole lifespan, from cradle to grave, as they say, from the beginning to the end. And I wanted to learn about people in all aspects of life so I could advocate for them in the community in all aspects of life. And so that's what drew me to family medicine. And I went on to do adolescent and young adult medicine as a fellowship because I really thought that a lot of these changes or illnesses that we see in adulthood or later life, you can have a powerful time to impact people at this change of life. This beginning at first independence was a really powerful moment. And so I thought that'd be the best way to think about how to change lifestyles.
That's awesome. And since you are working as faculty at USC and you've done fellowships and things like that, what advice do you have for students in terms of how to succeed on rotations?
Well, I think when I care for students or when they're working with me, the best thing for a student to be is excited, eager, well slept, and ready to work hard for the day is important, but also open. I enjoy working with students who are open to learning, even open to working outside of what they expected to be doing for the day. For example, if you're coming to work with me on my campus with taking care of my students, you might actually end up being someone's quote unquote doula through their IUD insertion, or you might really end up helping someone to get back to their vehicle because they sprained their ankle. And that's not exactly the art of medicine, but it's so much a part of being a part of a ethical, appropriate, healthcare system. And so I really appreciate my students to go the extra mile to care for patients. And the other tip I would give is to ask, how can I excel in this day with you or on this rotation? Because every one of these clinicians that are volunteering to teach students have different expectations. And if you want to get good marks and do well, it's best to know what you're being graded by or what criteria exists for you.
I totally agree, and I love that. You made two great points. One is that while we're here to learn medicine, and even us as attendings, we're still learning every day, it's important to think about like the human side of care. So while you may not necessarily be thinking through a disease process or doing something as a physical exam, it's important to think about how you can help patients in other ways, like you said, like helping them to the car or helping them do other things that can help them function as a patient, and being a team player is very important as being a part of the team. And then you also mentioned expectations, which is very important because one attending may have a different expectation than another. And it's always great to start off with finding out what those expectations are in the beginning instead of midway or even at the end of a rotation when you get certain feedback.
Right. I also think that it's valuable to ask for feedback frequently. In my perspective, I think of feedback similar to the way I think of GPS. If your GPS didn't tell you got to the wrong place, you would be upset. You want to know as soon as you make the wrong turn, not when you're at the wrong building. And so I would definitely ask for feedback when you do something that's new, something feels uncomfortable, or just at a timed basis. For example, once weekly or halfway through your rotation would be a good time to ask what you're doing well and where you can improve.
That's great advice.
At Med School Coach, we know that getting into medical school is hard. In fact, 60% of pre-meds who apply to medical school don't even get accepted. And if you want to get accepted into a top medical school, it's even harder. It's a complicated process, and even students with great grades and MCAT scores get left out. That's why more students than ever are turning to Med School Coach for admissions advising. Our advisors are all physicians and former admissions committee members, so they know exactly what medical schools are looking for. One-on-one admissions advising from Med School Coach makes all the difference. Our expert team will help you develop a game plan, prepare your application, edit your essays, and coach you for interviews. Every pre-med has a story, and we'll help you tell it so you can stand out from the crowd. Visit us online at medschoolcoach.com and use offer code PODCAST10 to save 10% up to $400 on a Med School Coach admissions advising package. You can achieve your medical school dreams, and Med School Coach can help.
Earlier, you mentioned that practicing family medicine is important to know about the whole person and how their environments can kind of like affect their health. How would you recommend that physicians advocate for their patients?
The first step in advocating for your patients is always going to be listening. This is the way that you're doing your individual human-based research on what is going on in your community. So the first thing is always to listen to the sacred spaces that you share with your patients, these stories of how they got injured or why they're feeling ill or what's going on with their medicines. Always listen. The second thing I learned from reading a lot of Atul Gawande is always to be counting and thinking about it in groups. For example, when we were working in Baltimore, and I can say we because you and I work together in Baltimore, we realized that a good amount of our patients were younger. Even though we're seeing from cradle to grave, we really weren't seeing that full spectrum of older age. And if you realize that over time, the next thing is to ask why. So first listen, second think and count, and then three, ask why. And a lot of the whys for women working in Baltimore was because of food access, substance abuse, substance use, limited access to healthcare, limited access to addiction support, intentional placement of poor housing. And these are what I would say are rooted in systemic racism against the population. But you always have to ask the why for what's going on with your patients. Both you can ask them because they may have interesting and valuable insight, but you should also ask a bigger group. So I think it's important to think about people as individuals and as a community level response. So those are the first steps. Then once you get that information, that's when you start your advocacy piece. And so really advocating is starting at those roots and saying, how can I approach this? Who can join me in this venture? For me, what I did was when I was working as a resident, I found out that our patients weren't really having a good time getting into our care. There was a lot of barriers and they were running into barriers at a similar place in the city. So we grouped ourselves together. We found like-minded people. We started doing health screenings in that area where we could talk about issues, do some of our patient care in that area where our patients were frequenting to help their overall health outcomes. And we thought that was a good way. And our patients responded well. We gained new patients and they learned more information and they felt more comfortable with us as being their providers. So that's one example of how to advocate for patients. But you can do this in a lot of other systems, regions, and environments.
That's good advice. I love how you put it into the sense of a community. Like every community is different. So you have to do a needs assessment and see what your patients actually need. Because currently, I live in the Washington, D.C. area, and you live in LA, and the needs of a patient living in the district are different than the needs of a patient living on the West Coast. So, for instance, right now, there are the fires going on the West Coast, and our coast doesn't have fires, and those types of things can impact patients differently, and you may have different needs for advocating for certain things like climate change, which we all need, but more rapidly where you guys are right now.
Right. And it allows you to use your voice, because what you have that's special than other people in the world or in our systems is that we get to talk to patients about their private details. We get to share this sacred space with them. And this gives us time to see how many people are having this similar barrier. How can we address this? How widespread is this? And this is a valuable piece of medicine, and it's so important to how to care for your patients accurately and appropriately.
That's awesome. As we kind of mentioned and hit on some of the key points, 2020 is a year where a lot of core issues affecting patients' livelihood are being highlighted globally. For example, climate change, how COVID is affecting different health disparities and highlighting how prevalent they are in certain communities, police brutality, and a lot of other things. How do you suggest that physicians can engage in these issues as activists?
You're right. This is similar to how I would approach any topic when it relates to advocating for your health or for your patient's health. In 2020, what we're seeing is that we have a slowing down of a lot of our old infrastructure. We had some less time with sports than we usually do for the year. And that kind of made, in my perspective, it made a vacuum or an opening for us to talk about these social issues that have always been present about police brutality and violence. And the ways that we can advocate for our patients is make this real. Some people will feel the need that to separate this issue from healthcare or separate it from racism itself, or just saying, oh, this one bad incident between these two people. But what you can do is use your voice, because we know as healthcare providers that what is going on is killing people on a larger level. We know that seeing police brutality and violence in the streets against people that look like you is dangerous for your own personal mental health. And we know that this imprints on you. This is a trauma that we're experiencing as a community. And we have evidence that trauma definitely kills people over time and is passed down from generation to generation genetically. So we can share the information that we know about the epigenetics of trauma, the effects of trauma on the human body with others, and we should use our voice loudly. So I'd recommend that any platform you have, this platform, your social media platform, speaking with your friends and family, that we always bring this to a larger concept, because it's a winning approach from the other perspective to separate and say it's just one incident. It's just a handful of incidents. But from someone who wants to be an advocate or a doctor, it's important to say that it's just not one instance. This is a jaw-dropping, violent attack on people and that we're seeing on social media. However, we're seeing the same things when we're not giving access to care, when we're not giving food security, when we're not allowing people to live in safety. And so I would recommend that you bring it back to the bigger picture at every moment you can. For me, that's been meeting people who are like-minded in Los Angeles, planning events to talk about homelessness, community value, healthcare. But for you, that may look like letter writing. It might even just be talking to your own friends and family about these serious issues to expand their information and empower them to act. But it's all important. Every part of it is important.
I totally agree with that. And I love that you highlighted that every person can make an impact, and it doesn't all necessarily have to be in the same way. For instance, you mentioned like some people may be out there physically in the community doing advocacy things, but some people may do it in other ways, like talking with family, doing letter writing, doing phone banking, and other things. I think that the message that we're saying is that every little bit helps, and you should use your voice to discuss and move forward on issues that you believe should be addressed.
Definitely, that's the point. Also, to me, I feel strongly that as a medical professional, making your voice and your opinion heard when it comes to things like this, such as human rights, it helps people feel safe with talking to you and sharing their details. Because that's what we're asking people to do, is come in, be vulnerable, and share how we can help better their lives. And if you don't say that I am opposed to violence and I support basic human rights, how can a person feel safe telling you their private details of their life?
Absolutely. I love that you said that, because as physicians, no matter what specialty you choose, people are going to share the most intimate moments of their lives with you. And that is a privilege. People are going to share when they are being physically abused. People are going to share when they're struggling with food insecurity. People are going to share when they can't pay your medical bills because they are going to lose their homes because their mortgages are being foreclosed on, or their landlord is kicking them out because we are living in COVID right now, and some people can't finance certain bills because they're not making any money. And it's one thing, and a lot of people may say that politics should be separated from healthcare, but healthcare is a political issue if you put it like that. Like, it shouldn't be, but it is. Like, human rights are rights. And that's, and a lot of people go into medicine saying like, I'm doing this to help people. And you really are helping people. And you just have to figure out how and what issues that you want to help them with.
Exactly. We're talking about human rights issues all the time in healthcare at every aspect. And it's so valuable to think of it, like you mentioned, as a privilege to share these intimacies with people. And I believe you have to earn this privilege. It's something that you need to earn on a regular basis. And this is why I really love family medicine, is because it's always about the whole person. You know, we have those beautiful moments where we're caring for a parent and their child. We're learning about how this parent functions and how that may affect how this child functions. Or in our case, we had so many multi-generational families. We had grandmas, parents, and children, and we were caring for all of them. And you learn so much about what these individuals are facing based upon what the whole family or community is facing. So family medicine really helped me stay grounded in the community, as I always wanted to when I was growing up.
That's awesome. And I love the push for family medicine. Everyone that's listening, you don't have to choose that specialty, but it is the most special one. Shameless plug. I will say that you brought up, we've been talking about great issues that are affecting everything. And I just want to put in a shameless plug right now, because on November 3rd is voting day. So I strongly encourage you to talk to everyone that you know and vote, whether it be by mail or in person. Be sure to wear your mask and do your civic duty. And that's just a personal plug for me.
I couldn't agree more. When we're thinking about healthcare being political or voting rights, what we're talking about largely is that in the system that is the country that we live in today, there are policies that affect how you seek healthcare, such as the Affordable Care Act, such as our decision not to have universal health care. And these are policies. So I agree, it should be nonpartisan. We should all be able to support health and well-being and rights for all. But unfortunately, policies are involved in who gets to live where, whose streets are cleaned when, who gets what access to education, healthcare, finances. And so this makes it innately political, even though the sound of that doesn't sound beautiful to have basic rights be politicized. However, it's so important to be active in the political environment that you live in. And that is a great way to speak for your community if that's your favorite way. You can vote in the presidential election. You also should definitely get into your ballot, prepare for your ballot, learn what local things are happening, what local DAs, politicians, council people are up for nomination or to be elected this year. And you really want to learn how this impacts what you're seeing day to day. There's a lot of things that are powerfully affecting us right now. The way that our country is treating immigrants to our current population, this is affecting us. It's not right to abuse people in any context. And so thinking about having your politicians locally and nationally represent your values is extremely important. And if you have other ways to help would be great, such as helping people who may have limited access or transportation to their voting polls to help them with that. You can also not only register to vote online, you can verify that you are registered, because the last thing you want is a surprise when you're trying to mail in your ballot or go in person. So definitely I recommend not only registering, but verifying you're registered. And you can do that online very easily. For me, I have a QR code for this on my cell phone that I share with people when I'm waiting in line at the grocery store, taking a walk for the day. Anything where I'm anywhere close to these 6 feet parameters, I'm like, have you registered to vote? Did you check? And I think that's really important that we're checking with each other to make sure we're in a good place. Students are a different population entirely, because some students live and work in the same place that they've always done so. But a lot of students may have residencies in states that are different from where they study or where they're currently living. And I would ensure that whatever that is for you works in your favor. You know, I grew up in Florida, and so that was my permanent residence and where I voted for a long time until I became a permanent resident of California. And I thought it was such a value to have my perspectives represented in Florida.
At Med School Coach, we know that studying for the MCAT exam can be challenging, especially for busy students on the go. That's why our team created MCAT Prep, the only all-encompassing study app built specifically for the MCAT. MCAT Prep by Med School Coach provides student access to extremely high-quality content and a personalized curriculum for free. The app has more than 250 videos, 1,000 flashcards, and 1,000 unique MCAT questions. Plus, MCAT Prep by Med School Coach allows students to create a personalized study schedule and track progress over time. You need every competitive advantage you can get to get into medical school, and now you can put the experts from Med School Coach into your pocket. It's the closest pre-med students can come to a personal tutor without spending a penny. Download MCAT Prep by Med School Coach for free at medschoolcoach.com/MCAT. Or download it directly from the Apple Store or Google Play Store. You can achieve your medical school dreams, and MCAT Prep by Med School Coach can help.
That's awesome. I love that you highlighted that not only is the presidential election important, but we have to be involved at the local level. And when you're voting, look into those people, because they are going to be affecting your community and the issues that you care about. And even if you're there for a short while in your place where you're studying, that's your community. So you will be affecting your patients' lives there. But if you live in one of those battleground states, it may not be a bad idea to have your voice heard there as well by doing absentee ballots.
Yeah, whatever is, I definitely support following the regulations of voting. But definitely, if you're only visiting with someone for a rotation for a month, you might need to vote in your primary residence so that you can have your voice heard in these battleground states.
Absolutely. I love all of the pearls of wisdom that you gave us today. As we come to a close, what is one final pearl that you'd like to share with our pre-medical and medical students as they go through the process of beginning their medical journey?
Pre-medical students, what a lovely life. My advice for pre-med students is actually to live your fullest life. In all honesty, there is so much pressure to pre-narrow, and I followed that pressure. I have a background in biology. I have a bachelor's in cellular and molecular biology, and that's what I loved. I was president of the biology club, and that was my path. But when we got to medical school, I realized that there's people with all these different interesting backgrounds, and it definitely can add another lens. From my perspective, having other lenses to view what you're experiencing by is so helpful. For me, my lenses are, I'm a Black woman, I'm a science nerd, a literature enthusiast, and I would say a social rights activist, right? And that's how I view medicine. But your lens or your experience could be wide. You could be an international traveler. You could maybe learn another language in college and serve as a certified medical interpreter and a medical student when you're there. That would be amazing. I think that diversifying yourself is one of the best times to do it in pre-med, but also it helps your application be more unique so that people are impressed by the things that you've done. Sometimes our science majors get lumped in, and it's hard for us to differentiate ourselves one from another. So I definitely encourage living your fullest life and experiencing a breadth of what college is and bringing that into your medical studies later.
And what about for the med students who are already in school?
Advice for med students: sleep is valuable, and this time together is so temporary and very valuable. If I could go back to be in medical school, I would dig even deeper into those relationships with my peers, because you guys are the future of healthcare. And I love my medical students, or my co-medical students, that you would say, my peers. And that was just valuable. So I would always dig into those relationships and experience what being a doctor is like in real life. You have that advantage to meet so many doctors. Shadow them all you can so you can see what their life is like. In my perspective, you never know what you're into until you're knee deep. You know, you don't really know what it's like to be a doctor until you're all the way in, but you can get a lot of previews from seeing what's the quality of life of the doctor that is the specialty that I want to go into. What do they do at night? Do they able to see their families? Are they happy? I feel like that's the hardest part is overall want to be happy. And you have to figure out, how is that specialty or that residency or that medical school supporting the whole person? Because no matter how smart we are, we just can't be doctors as the only thing we are in our lives.
Absolutely. And I think what you summarized very well for both pre-med and med students is to find something outside of medicine that makes you you and makes you happy. Because you can utilize that in different ways, whether or not it's for your application, but you gotta love it, or for life, because being a doctor doesn't define you as a component of who you are.
Absolutely. It's a component of who you are. I remember when I was on geriatrics, our attending asked us, tell me about yourself. And we all started our resumes. I went to college here. I went to medical school here. This is it. And then the attending was like, so your life started in college? And so when people ask you about yourself, when you think about yourself, it's valuable to have other descriptions of yourself than just academia. Those are the parts of yourself that'll help you relate to your patients, having other descriptors or identifiers or interests. Those are the parts of you that may nurture you when you have that really tough patient. Or patient care will always, if you're doing it right, have a moment where it brings you to tears and you are sad for maybe your patient's outcome or feeling helpless, and having those other parts of your life can bolster you and allow you to make it to the next day and continue your path.
That's awesome. Well, I really appreciate everything that you've shared with us during this session. And I thank you for coming and joining us and sharing your words of wisdom. And we would love to have you back in the future. But for now, we're going to say goodbye to everyone, and we'll see you again. Well, I'll see you again next week.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I deeply appreciate this time with you all. I encourage you to reach out to me. I'm available, of course, on LinkedIn. I love mentoring. And so anyone who's looking for a family medicine mentor in Los Angeles, please don't hesitate to reach out. It was a great time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Each episode of the Prospective Doctor podcast is brought to you by Med School Coach. To access articles, videos, webinars, and free tools to help you succeed on your journey toward med school and beyond, visit our website, prospectivedoctor.com. We hope you tune in again next time.